All right, so we're heading up to a cave called Bentleys Cave, and we have a pretty good sized group today. And these are a lot of new cavers and some grotto members, Steve and Felicia, who will be leading the trip. And Bentleys Cave is interesting because it has a history going all the way back to the time of the Revolutionary War. It also has some history a little bit later as a gambling den. So a man leased the cave to use it for mining clay for paint. But in reality, he was actually just using it as a location for illegal gambling.
So we're at Bentleys Cave or Bentleys Cavern in Berlin, New York. It's a NCC preserve. We're standing above the entrance, right next to a giant sinkhole. A beginner caving group from Central Connecticut Grotto. I'd say I haven't been here in at least 6 or 7 years. But this was one of the first caves I ever went into.
All right, so we just entered the cave, and now we're walking through this really impressive narrow canyon with like 20-foot tall ceilings, and it looks like it keeps going in this direction. It's actually really impressive. So let's follow this and see where this takes us. So this cave was known about as early as the 1700s, as early as the time of the Revolutionary War. And there's even a legend that goes back to the time of the Revolution that some captured Hessian soldiers had escaped from their American captors and actually hid out in this cave. There's really no records to prove if that story is true or not, but it's just an interesting legend that's tied with this cave. So we came to the end of this almost slot canyon-like passage, and we're actually going to have to do a little bit of crawling through here now. The cave gets a little bit smaller. We just came through a really low stream passage crawl, but now the cave has opened up into this enormous cavern. So I believe this large room had a really interesting use. A man leased the cave to remove clay to use for paint filler, or so he said. What he was really using the cave for was a gambling den, and he would have people come down here through the crawl that we just went through to this large room, and they were equipped with like food and supplies so that people could stay down here for multiple days and gamble, which was at the time obviously illegal because they had to hide from the authorities in order to do it. So you can see there's all sorts of initials and dates carved on the walls. I didn't find any going back to the 1700s, but it's just interesting that there's so much old graffiti here. I wonder if any of those names were put there by the original gamblers who came down here. But it's said that fortunes were made and lost in this cave. So they had an African-American man stand guard at the entrance, and they even had a cabin to live in for him outside the cave. But eventually, the man who was there to guard the cave accidentally slipped up and mentioned the gambling going on in the cave. And one day, as the gamblers were exiting, there was a sheriff standing outside waiting for them, and that was it for their illegal gambling operation. But this is a very interesting cave because it had use as a smuggling den. There was textiles that were stolen locally and hidden in here, and also the gambling. So you have a lot of these uses that were a little bit on the nefarious side right here. And I wonder if you ever excavated the floor of this cave, you would even find some remnants from that time, maybe even some coins or something like that. But it certainly is another interesting cave, both geologically and historically.